All right. Hey, everyone. Just for anybody who hasn't listened to the podcast before, I'm Corey Cummins. I'm the founder of Manly Convos. And just to give you kind of a little background on why I started this, the goal of this really is to help destigmatize men's mental health. And the goal of doing this, or how we're going to do it, is actually two ways. One is by having conversations with men who've gone to therapy, and by having conversations with mental health professionals about specific topics for men. So today I'm really excited. We have Pedro Storni. He's a really close friend of mine. I've actually known him for 10 years. We met a long time ago on a trip to Greece, and we've had many travel experiences around the world, mostly in Brazil or Berlin, visiting him. But I was lucky enough that he was excited to want to be on Manly Combos. So yeah, Pedro, want to give a little background on yourself?
Hey, Corey, thank you so much for inviting me for this. And you know what? Congratulations, man. From the bottom of my heart, I think this is a wonderful project. And
Thank
I
you.
was super excited, as you mentioned, as you said, when you mentioned to me this podcast, and I was so thrilled to join at some point. So, yeah, a short introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Pedro. I am 35 years old. I am Brazilian, born and raised in São Paulo, and where I lived most of my life had some pretty nice experience internationally speaking before I finally decided to move abroad, and that was in 2016. So currently now I am living in Germany, in Berlin, and it's been 8 years now. Although I live in Berlin, I've been working remotely, and life has been pretty crazy over the past years, especially after. And well, also have my personal experiences as well, relationship, and some of the things as well that got me into trying to go and explore a little bit about what's inside us, when it comes down to inner child and all of these things. So in therapy, I started doing therapy. It's been just going straight to the point, right? I mean, that's what we
Yeah,
were
go
just
for it.
talking about as well. Just wanted to I had my sessions with therapy around my life, but now more than ever, it's been something incredibly exciting for me. Just
Why?
having,
Why did your journey start with therapy? So can we talk about kind of what started your journey and how you got to where you are today?
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. Man, therapy for me was, well, you know me very well because you're a good friend of mine, so you know I have a lot of energy, right? And I guess when I was a child, I was this very energetic child. And I mean, from a child's perspective, it's pretty interesting because you always think that you're the center of the universe, right? And you're mostly the cause of every problem. And when you don't, I mean, I grew up in a big city, right? We're talking about São Paulo, and you're from New York, right? So we're both from large cities, which means when you're a kid, you have to sort of adapt somehow. It's always like a hustle in terms of school, and your parents are both have full-time jobs. So I don't know. I guess coming to the point of my relationship with therapy, not how I felt, but how it started. It was mostly kid is doing too much in school. Like we need to talk to your parents. We need to tell them that you won't stand still. You're never quiet. And now you're starting to actually bother the other kids around. So it's kind of like, it's funny. There's an episode of Simpsons that they get a chart, a 3D chart of over Bart Simpsons, and in the chart it's kind of like, so you have a board which is standing up, but then there's a big like an elastic, dragging everything down. And that was Bart Simpson's chair, and every colleague who's sitting around him, somehow they're being dragged down. So I guess that was kind of the feeling that my caretakers in school kind of had over my who I was when I was a child, and that led my parents, well, they led them to actually put me in therapy, suggest my parents to put me in therapy, many different times with many different therapists. So I guess what I'm saying is, and maybe people are listening to this, they kind of have a similar story. But to me, therapy always had a connotation, not in terms of being crazy, but more in terms of being wrong,
Mm.
being unfit. And the child who goes to therapy is the child who flew out of the cuckoo's nest somehow. So to me, it was always a drag. I never enjoyed that. And as a matter of fact, one of my experience with therapists when I was 12 is she told me that I wasn't planned by my parents, which is perfectly normal. I think it was just a matter of timing. And that led me actually to play this against my parents when I was young. I was a pretty smart kid, so I knew how to go around. But that was it. And but you know what? In the end, it was good because it gave me this feeling of somehow kind of like keep trying, And therapist was fine. They always listened to me or something. I guess I was the one who was often often because I just want to play video game and do all the things that the normal kids were doing in the afternoon after school. And then afterwards, long time without therapy, right? I did therapy again when I was in my mid-20s, and that was amazing. Was something more of a psychoanalysis, sort of. So I did with a analyst. My cousin is a therapist, so she indicated me this guy. Came after an ex-girlfriend as well who was working in the area as well. So I thought it could be an interesting idea to take a deep dive.
Yeah.
I guess you did because Lacan is kind of like it. Everything kind of goes from Freudism, and I might be butchering information because I'm not a professional over this. But I try to talk from my experience and from the things I consume. The Lacanian style is kind of like that classic one you see on movies, where you have the couch and then
Got it.
eventually you go on the couch and you go with your therapist and you just talk. And then he's like, there's no many directions, more of questioning. And honestly speaking, that was a bomb. And I love it because to me, that was we will get there eventually, but I guess to me it's so I'm kind of like an anxious I kind of have an anxious attachment style, I would say. And it goes a lot from from our childhood, right? That's our blueprint. And we can go back on this, but one of the things that I really enjoyed on this particular man who was treating me by that time was that it was ruthless, It was just questions and no directions, no smile, no nothing. And I guess I needed that a little bit to just go myself on that, digging up that layer and try to understand a bit more of some of the things that never came across myself. And
What
anyway,
what what made you decide to go to back to therapy at 25? So when you were doing that, like, what was the reason that made you say, yeah, I should go back to therapy now? What was it that you were trying to work through?
a good point. I think it was more in order. So it was external, the cause. It wasn't me trying to improve myself. It was more me at that time trying to show to the person that I was with that I was interested in doing it. So, especially because she was a professional as well of this area. But then, yeah, and the funny thing is, this is we end up breaking up. But then the therapy still on, or still changed. So
So you said you went to therapy because you wanted to work on your attachment style to help you in a relationship, the relationship you were in.
no,
Is that right?
actually, I'm so sorry actually because I'm not expressing myself well on this. Actually, so I went to the therapy. Now I can tell you this about attachment style because now I do a therapy. Now I have another therapist, and this one is this has been a very fulfilling experience where I'm doing it by myself, independently, just trying to uncover and trying to fill in a few gaps and understand a bit more about where that all comes from. But that one in the past was something more of me trying. It's funny. It was an attempt of myself to please the person that I was with, and
Got it.
led me into doing therapy. So kind of doing the right thing for the wrong reason, which eventually came out interesting and it gave me a lot of tools, especially afterwards when when you move out from your country, right? So there was a lot of tools that I found out in that session that I could be using in order to have a more balanced, steady life. No peaks, no valleys when I was finally in Germany.
And then after that, so how long of a break did you have between that and the next time you decided to go back to therapy?
And that's a big story, actually. I mean, you won't like that. Probably therapists won't like that as well. Because the thing is, like, you finish therapy and then you figure yourself, like, all right, hey, I'm pissed. Great, let's play life. And then, well, that's how life goes, right? I mean, I guess the most important thing of therapy that I can bring to people is and to myself, and the reason why I started me again, and before I said that, is more about you, when you start noticing that you're fine, that's the time when you need to kind of like renew your therapy, renew your plan. All right, I think I need 6 more months, 1 more year, something like that. Because the challenge is not to get fixed or feel fixed, it's just to keep that, right? So after that, I spent a good amount of time without doing therapy. And more than that, I was very traumatized by therapy as well. Because I was with a therapist, and to me, one of the things got messed it up. So I kind of grew up on the bitter side of myself. It's like, all right, I don't think I need therapy, Like, why would somebody who cannot handle their own problems are going to try to handle mine, all of this. But the fun part is that I always respected people who did, and I understood the true value of it, right? So eventually, 7 years of my life passed by, and it was a beautiful experience. But then I realized that I haven't done much work on myself when it comes down to relationship, to personal relationships, more romantic ones. And had another relationship which didn't end up so well, but respectfully, it was a good time. And after that, I realized, all right, there are some patterns that are kind of backfiring again, So all of these things that I thought I sorted out with myself, maybe I didn't. I just, hid them very well under a rug, kept living my life, kept meeting new people, and then eventually they start coming out. And it's such an interesting experience, Corey, because it's terrifying, because you kind of like see some patterns coming back to you, and well, that was what happened with me. And then I realized, like, oh shit, like I didn't actually took a chance to have a look on those things, right? So then
What were some of these patterns that you noticed that came back out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess sometimes all right, so let's put it this way, and this is not my word, Tony. Um, so when you leave, so until you're 25 years old, that's where you kind of like begins your maturity, right? Your prefrontal cortex is starting to formate, and then you're an adult, you're pretty much independent. But then if you think a bit, like most of the things that you have with yourself, they're not yours fully. I mean, it's always that teacher or the people you're hanging around, your family. So this is more familiarization than you're really like, this is how you really see the world, right? And then after that, it becomes the whole process. I mean, some people start earlier, some people later, some people don't start, some people don't finish. I mean, there's all this sorts of it. In my case, I guess what kind of felt is like, all right, I guess the things that I had in my mind about what is to build a relationship with somebody, to have a family, and I mean, the classic meaning of life, which is something that I really want, by the way, and I'm very glad that I am in peace with that. But I would say, so that's the point, right? When it comes down to 25, you just understand that shit, all of these things that I thought I had, and they're not actually mine, and then you have this new journey where you're gonna try to figure out what is yours and what it isn't, right? And I guess I didn't do a good work when it comes down to relationship. And to me, in my mind is, so if you're gonna do medicals or if you're gonna do university, what do? Go and study to take the test, right? And if you want to, I mean, you're traveling, for example, you told me you're going out on vacation, right? So what do? You plan your vacation. You just don't like, all right, where am I going? That's the place. And that goes for everything in life, right? You're going to have a job interview, you study for that interview, you're going to meet with somebody, you would like to catch up a little bit before that. So when you go out and find out the person that you want to live the rest of your life with and build something, why don't you read about that, And I guess I didn't, and I know a lot of people don't. So to me, it was more like, and not reading about relationship, right? I mean, obviously, it's important to handle people, to know how to read people as well, and to put yourself in front of them as well, but also try to understand, hey, who is this guy? What this guy is really, what is really inside me and what is not mine. And then you understand that most of the things that you have, they are not necessarily coming from yourself, right? So I guess the reason why, I guess no, the reason why I went down in therapy is basically sometimes in a relationship, you build a story because you have a beautiful story in your mind, right? And then the person you are with, they they are the they are the protagonist of that story. But then with time, they start becoming themselves, which is super reasonable, because in the beginning of a relationship, there's always too many things involved, and you have limerence, you have hormones, you have all this, a la-di-da moment is all beautiful, but then eventually you start to become yourself, right? And I think this is so fun because you hear from so many people like, shit, like, oh man, who is this person I am with it, like, oh, it feels like I don't know you when you have your first argument with your partner. But it's true, you kind of don't, because both of you were in this very beautiful moment where it's kind of necessary for people to be together. It's more of a biological thing rather than cultural, right? But there again, this is the moment where you feel the story. And to me, everything was always too intense. And then you have this beautiful story, but then the protagonist stopped being the protagonist. And that means that in order to keep that story up, you need to have, and if the main character is not doing what they're expected to, then you need to do the job in order to take that story. And what that meant to me is that eventually I was losing track of myself and I didn't even notice, I don't blame the person because I mean, that was the person she thought she was with as well, right? So she got disappointed as well. And then with time, it's kind of like, all right, you get so far from yourself that when you realize, then you become frustrated and resentful. And then it's kind of like the rest becomes history. So this time I wanted to understand that, and then I have a very good friend. His name is Artur, mentioning him. Probably he's listening to us. He will. But this friend of mine always told me, like, man, therapy is great. You should, go back to it. Why not? And then eventually I said, like, all right, it's a good time to do that. So, and it's been 5 months now, and it's been beautiful. I love it.
Very nice. So I have some questions, some of the things you said.
Yeah.
So the one thing you were talking about, you said that, you have your thoughts that, until you're 25, or a lot of thoughts you have are thoughts that in theory aren't maybe created by you. Was there anything that stood out to you when you went through that process that really were like, actually, these are not kind of beliefs or thoughts that I want to have that have been kind of given to me since I was a kid? Was anything stood out to you?
No, sort of in terms of, I don't know if I'm sure if I can answer that, but what I would say is like more, I think the things that I aim more is more of how my father and my mother was together, and how I thought that was something, I thought that was the pattern, and my parents, they're super happily married and it's a beautiful relationship, but they're not me, right? And I guess what I try to do many times was just like reconstructing what my dad did in some ways. And it's funny because I even remember some episodes from childhood, like some of the things that my dad did. And don't get me wrong, I love them. They gave me a great, they did the best they can and they did a wonderful job, right? But there again, I mean, you know what, actually, I have even a theory on this because I think that our generation is a generation that comes from, it's a beautiful thing, the emancipation of women in work and all of these things, right? But we come from a generation where we're kind of like the first kids that went with mom and dad having a career, right? So that means that maybe we were raised by many other people besides them, and there was not too many information about what could be the effect on this. And I don't blame them, I don't blame the world. But what I would say nowadays is that I've become sort of a pleaser on some things, in order to. So what I guess my conclusion is, in order to get the things that I thought was the right things that I wanted for myself, because those are the things that I saw my parents doing in their lives, I would have to negotiate my essence with people in order to have that. So that kind of make me an incredibly seductive guy, which I really enjoy that. I mean, I'm a salesperson and I like to take care of myself. But in the other way, it takes out your whole understanding of what is your own needs, because in the end, what you're doing is just like you're fetching for compliments or approval somehow. And when you don't get it, you get frustrated.
No, that's very true. It's actually interesting about what you're saying. Something I was talking to a friend about recently that actually today I was talking to my colleague and we were talking about relationships. And I said that if I ever got into another relationship, that I would actually have do relationship counseling or therapy once it gets serious, like once a month, because it's the same thing that you said earlier about therapy, where everyone has this preconceived notion that you only do it. I think you said you only do when you have this connotation of being wrong. And the same thing with relationship counseling. People only go when things are really bad. Usually it's too late once you go to relationship counseling. And not saying that's always the case. And I said to my colleague, I was like, think about it. You have two people, two different backgrounds, two different ways of perceiving the world, two different ways of communicating. Yeah. And I go, when you think about that, how do you make sure that you have a safe space to like understand each other and to really, truly feel safe? And the problem is when two people try to communicate and help each other understand, it can be difficult. Like I'm sure you've had this where you have a conversation with someone that goes in circles because you keep explaining the same thing in different ways. And sometimes you need a middle person who can really break it down for both of you. And it's something that I definitely will do. And it's something a lot of my friends kind of go, of course you do it, Corey, because you're into therapy. And I go, sure. I was like, but it actually does make sense. And especially it made me laugh when you said it is, as we would say it is, once the honeymoon stage is over, that's when you really see someone. And just because the honeymoon stage is over doesn't mean that person still isn't what you want. It's just might be that you don't understand how to, you don't actually know how to understand them and really communicate with them in certain ways, especially when things are difficult or someone's stressed out or whatever it is. So yeah, just something that made me think about when you were talking about it.
Love it. And absolutely, man. And you know what? I think this is like this phase, this is a beautiful way of putting it, because normally it's like, yeah, all right, so what's happening? The hormones are not kicking. Let's find another partner, right? It's like, all right, guys, drugs are over. Let's find another rave. Quite the opposite, right? Because that's, you know what? I think the beauty of, I get you on this. And I don't know if I would do exactly the same, but you know what? To me, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, because there's a thing about so nowadays everybody talks about red flags, right? Red flags here.
I absolutely hate that.
Yeah,
I can't stand it. It's like a checklist. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, red flag this, and it's like,
and you know what? I've seen guys kind of interrogating girls, and with an aspect of red flags, and vice versa.
Oh, totally. That happens on both sides.
Well, and that's the whole thing about, I love the concept of you being prepared to things, and you know what, coming back a little bit, I guess the most important part is for you to understand yourself, because when you understand yourself, then you understand what triggers you whenever you are meeting somebody else, right? Because, I mean, I speak from my experience, everything's super intense, Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Love bomb. Oh, intense. And I remember my 20s. Wow, that was horrible. But then you realize, like, all right, those are the moments that you need to, whenever the emotions are too high, it's like, all right, maybe it's time for me to be a bit more rational as well and try to understand what are the things here that are not suitable or not. And it's all like, all right, red flag here, no. 5 red flags, you're out. No, people are not. I mean, we're not algorithms. Although some people really enjoy this idea. But in the end, it's just, you need to understand what are your flags and not what are the other one's flags. And I think this is something very imperative. And I would say, that's the beauty of therapy, and that's why I think I don't take up a therapy, but I mean, if it works, great. But if the other person has an understanding of with therapy, obviously better without it. But if they understand a little bit more about what keeps them away, what are their traumas and all the things, it makes everything easier to communicate. Because the main problem of relationship in my beginning, in my understanding, I am not a professional in this, but I took my moment, right? I mean, every man with a broken heart, it's somebody becomes some sort of academic on things, right? And it's that's the beauty of life, and that's how you improve yourself, right? Always with the pain. But I guess, um, and I'm sorry to steer up a lot, and then finally give you the answer. Kind of
It's
like
okay.
doing this. Thanks, you know me. Um, but I guess one of the things that is really, really important is to understand that whenever you have this crossroads, right, those are blind spots, and blind spots are beautiful moments in life. And blind spots are opportunities, right? It's just like, for example, if you work with you and I, we both work with clients the whole time, right? And a happy client is always a great opportunity to make them a better one. You know, you can always get that because there's energy there, right? It's like, oh, hey, this is unhealed love. So maybe sometimes, if you don't know yourself very well, it's going to be hard for you to communicate the things that the partner, the person who is the counterside of the relationship, will have difficult to read them. And if you don't do a good effort on this, you come up with what I like to say, and this is not mine. This comes from Dr. Robert Glover, who writes a beautiful book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. I love this book. It's from the 80s, and it talks a lot about it's healing man's, right? It's the idea of not being a nice man, a nice guy, but being a good man, which are completely
Hmm.
different things, right? Where one is more of a manipulative, controlling person, disguised as someone nice because he's always afraid of losing. He always knows that some shit's gonna happen on him, so he needs to prepare the situation for when he drifts away. He has an excuses, right? Well, the good man is more like, oh, look, I know where I'm going. I'm feeling comfortable with my skin, yeah, and it makes easier for the person to read them. But when you have the problem with the blind spots coming back, right? So we were talking about when the hormones goes out, and then it's like, all right, how do we proceed on this? Many people struggle with that phase, and I guess this is for most of the men. I guess this is when you start having the covered contracts, which is I am not gonna do this if she doesn't do that. You know,
Hmm.
it's like if this person doesn't do this effort, then I am not gonna do this. And to me, this is the beginning of the end because that's just where you kind of like. Does that make sense to you?
No, totally. Yeah. If you have yeah, basically, I forgot what the word you said, but yeah, if you have, you're basically holding something over someone.
Covered contracts, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah, that's never a good thing in a relationship in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. And it's funny because this is not only in a passionate, in a marital relationship, that can come in many other sources into it. Friendship, it can come on your employer relationship. Like, for example, one of the things that I realized on my therapies is like, well, you know what? I guess I have this pleasing mindset, with my employer as well. And that gives me a lot of tasks, and sometimes I just get overwhelmed by my own self because I
Hmm.
just keep taking things, because I just want to please people. And when you look at yourself, it's like, oh shit, what's going on? And the blind spot of a relationship is kind of this, right? It's where you can just be true to yourself and say, like, yeah, look. And eventually there's a lot of, what is his name? Rosenberg, nonviolent communication as well, usually helps
Hmm.
on this. But yeah, know thyself. That's that
Love
was the
it.
quote in the Oracle of Delphi. Barely they know that this was the motto of modern psychology for men.
Yeah, no joke. Is there any advice you would give to other men struggling with mental health?
I enjoy answering this question. Thanks for asking. I don't I don't know if I would say advice. I'm always afraid of advice. Um, my suggestion to men who struggle with mental health is, and this is a lesson that I learned from experience, which is don't try to be the man, the lonely wolf. Like there's this, I guess now there's not. and me again putting context before answering, but the way I feel, the way I see, I don't feel the way I think. I think there's not too many people talking with a young man nowadays, and finally you see some action, right? But it's too extreme. So either you have this like red pill movements or the black pill, right? Which means, yeah, nobody cares. Keep hammering, put your head down, start working. And all right, it's I don't think this is a message that men should avoid, because I think yes, we need to have ownership, and yes, it's part of masculinity, in my opinion, to be self-sustainable, independent, as a provider as well, in many other things. I'm not saying that this is that you don't you have your feminine traces as well, of course, but being a man, there are some foundations that are very important, and in terms of the roles and so on. But I'm not saying that there are one cannot do what the other one do at to a certain point. But my suggestion to manage is, when you grew up in thinking that you can do everything by yourself, and that everything, and that you cannot whine and you cannot complain and all of these things, somehow you give the impression to men that they don't have needs that need to be met. And we do have needs that need to be met, and we do have our things. We do want to be complimented by our partners. We like to feel special once in a while. Like, I saw this video on Instagram, this reels of this woman saying like, yeah, do you know that if you compliment your guy, the compliment will last for a few weeks, maybe months, or even years. Like, even if you say you have a nice neck. And you know what, Corey? Once I remember from a partner of mine that she said, man, your legs are stronger than that table. And Corey, it's been 3 years and I fucking love that compliment. And I still, gorge myself a little bit on that. So my suggestion...
It's funny you say that. I was just looking on my phone real quick because my friend Irene, one of my best friends, posted this thing on Instagram today. Said, men too deserve to be spoiled, told they are handsome, told their efforts are appreciated. If he's doing his best to treat you like a queen, do your best to treat him as a king. His need to feel loved and appreciated is real.
Oh man!
She sent it to me, and I was like, I very much agree with that.
And your friend has a beautiful mindset. I love that. I kind of understand a little bit the woman's side on this, because I think a woman is more concerned about protection, security, and some other things as well. While for men, like for example, I love the scene of a man and a woman on an airport. Like the guy, I remember myself with my partners. It's like, all right, I'm looking all the exits. This is happening here. This is happening there. There's a guy there. This is dangerous. Blah, blah, blah. And the woman is just like, oh, all right, I'm enjoying my vibes or something, because you're kind of like looking at what is around. It's part of our role. If you look on the street, you see the women are more constrained and men are more expensive, right? And there's all about safety as well. But my point, anyway, sorry for prolonging on this, but it's more like, you have all of these tools and you have all of these things that makes you what you are, right? But in the other hand, community is a beautiful, important thing. So my honest suggestion to all men who are struggling with mental health, and men who are not struggling with mental health, because we men know that we like to help. It's fun. It's a human thing, right? Like you feel wanted, and there's nothing better than just like feel productive. Right. So I guess building a community, it's an important thing, If I knew the things I know now, doing my fuck ups on my previous relationship, yeah, it could be a completely different story, right? But I'm really glad that I've been through that, because it gave me the understanding. And one of the things that I struggled the most was loneliness. Because loneliness is, you don't feel it, until you feel it. Until you start like really, the way men gets frustrated is through anger. And anger is such a big feeling that there's so many macro feelings underneath, right? Yeah. And until you get through there. So I guess one of the things that having a community, having a friend, having somebody to talk with, I know it sounds like, yeah, but I don't want to beach and so on. But you know what? Yeah, you do. And you'll feel great after that.
No, I agree with everything you said. So there's a couple questions I always like to ask everybody. So first one, are there any books you have read regarding mental health that have helped you? You already recommended one. You already said No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Yes.
Are there any other ones you'd recommend?
Oh, there's several of them. I would say, I guess my favorite book is No More. Well, it's recent, right? But No More Mr. Nice Guy. I think it's a beautiful book because it talks a lot. And you know what? It's not only for men's. If you're for guys who are with their partners and they feel that they're struggling with this, they're feeling like resentful or something like that. Go for this. It's a great book. Dr. Robert Wolver. He's very popular now. He's been interviewed by a lot of podcasters as well. Maybe
Hmm.
one day. I'm sure he would have a great time talking to you, Howard. Likewise.
Maybe one day if we get a little bit bigger.
He's in Mexico. You can find him there. And
Perfect. Hey, any reason to go to Mexico?
there you
Happily.
go. Um, Besides that, I think, man, a man thinking. That one is such a beautiful book as well. I would
What's it
say,
called?
A man thinker. James, wait, you know what? I can go with this here
All right, go for it.
because I have it here in As a Man Thinketh by James Allen.
Okay.
It's a very old book. It's a very small book, but it's really nice. It has some pretty nice aphorisms. So go for it, people. And I mean, I have so many books that I would suggest, but in terms of that, I really enjoy writing holidays type of writing, And
I
I
haven't read
think,
his books in a long time.
yeah, likewise, I took his books over bad situations in relationships, and they all got fulfilled me quite well. But yeah, and there's another one which is a bit heavy, but yeah, and maybe you read this one as well, the A Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Yeah, this is one is guy who survived the Holocaust, and he's a psychologist, and he was talking about. It's interesting because he's viewed differently from most of the people. It's not about those who died, but more about those who survived. And he talks about finding a reason, finding a meaning. And I think honestly, I think this one is beautiful because. And again, from other books as well that I read, some of Stoicism is always good for people who are looking for solutions in tough times as well, because I mean the Stoics were beautiful in this. Epictetus with the whole things you control, things you can control. But in the end, I think the best thing about all of this book, especially Viktor Frankl, is you got to give a reason. And I guess the best thing if you are if you're struggling, if you're in that phase, which I like to call the zombie phase, because the zombie, man, I even changed my face when I talk about this because this shit is heavy. Because the zombie phase is that moment in life where you just like the things you love doing it, they're meaningless for you, they're pointless, And this is like, to me, that's like the biggest pain ever. Because if you take the will of a man, then you left him with nothing, right? So when you are on the zombie phase, you have to understand that all the things you're doing now, they're going to be very useful for you in the future. And we all know that. But for the zombie, it looks impossible. So one of the things I really enjoy about these lectures and all of these things is the simple message that you need to make one day connect with the other, and that's the beauty of life. If you give purpose, with everything you do now, it's going to meet an end on the other day. And everything you do tomorrow, always remember to put continues on the next chapter, And this is how you do it. Because in the end, when your brains are feeling a bit better, you have all that beautiful path that you built for yourself, when you're a zombie.
No, it's really interesting you say that. I've said to some friends who have never been to therapy and that have gone through things, some tough things that would very much warrant someone to go seek help. There's been something that has really happened in their life that you're like, oh, you really should go speak to someone. And they've asked me like, yeah, but why? Why should I go? Like, it's not going to do anything. And I go, well, I said to him, I was like, you're living life on autopilot. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, you're not actually allowing yourself to feel these things, these emotions. And I go, so you're just kind of going around on autopilot, not really allowing yourself to like feel things. And I go, that's not how you want to live life. And I go, listen, I understand it's not easy going to therapy. And I understand it's scary to, have to talk about things and let things out. I go, but you're not really experiencing life then. So yeah, it's funny. The zombie phase is a better way to probably put it. But yeah, I completely agree with you because you were talking about your parents, but who would you say is the person that shaped your values the most?
Wait, this is interesting because, I always thought I was kind of like, well, answering your question first, let's do it differently now. I answer first and then I blah, blah, blah. I think my father, mostly, and dad, yeah. And mom gave me love and teach me how to love, and my father teach me how to be a man. But it's funny, my father figure wasn't my dad, it was more my brother. And it's funny because now it's kind of like me and my brother, we have this clash once in a while. And it's kind of like, so the emancipation I'm having is all from my father, is from you, while he is having from my dad. And me and my brother were super, like, Corey, I sent you an audio one day on WhatsApp. And I think it was 5 minutes. And you said, like, that's the longest audio I've ever seen. And then I told you, bro, I just finished an audio with my brother. He was 28. So me and my brother, actually, we take our time, right? And sometimes we like to discuss this childhood and so on. And I found out from him, like, it was funny because in one of these conversations, and he does therapy, I do therapy, and you start doing therapy, so it's fun, right? Because it hurts, but it's fun because I love the quote: "You pull a feather, comes a whole chicken out of it." That's therapy, nothing different than that. And we were talking, and then he was in one of his audios. He was talking to me, and then I was like, Jesus, I think my brother was my dad figure, during my adolescence. And while I was an adolescent, and when I am thinking this, he's putting on the audio, I think I was your father figure, so it kind of like a mutual click. So a lot came from my brother as well. So I would say my dad, and then my brother, and then my mother. And the reason why is, I guess because I was a man, I kind of like wanted to be more, get some of the values more from the father figure rather than the mother figure in this level. But that doesn't exclude the fact that my mom teach me so many beautiful things, and I still learn so much from her. So yeah.
Can't replace the love from a mother. It's nothing
Yeah,
like it.
that's absolutely not like, I love that. But yeah, if people say things about my mom, it's like don't talk about my mom, don't talk about the Beatles. Then don't talk about my dad and my brother. That's kind of
I learned something new about you. I didn't realize you were a Beatles lover.
Ooh, Corey, come on. We need to
I
talk
didn't know
about
that.
that. Yes,
Yeah, growing up, my dad always had me listen to the Beatles.
man, lovely guy. Already love him.
So if you died tonight, what would you regret not doing?
Ooh, not buying my tickets to Vietnam to travel with my friend Corey on New Year's Eve, maybe. Corey, that's a tough question. I love it. But wait, before that, let me ask you something. When you ask this question, people answer directly or they take their time?
Yeah, usually they answer. Doesn't well, you can take if you need a couple seconds to think about it, go for it. There's no rush.
I'll be a dad.
Okay. Why?
Because I would love to build. I really would like to see how it is to create a human, from scratch with a decent partner and shape them, give them the tools, give them what I wanted people to give to me. And yeah, I think that's like, I really am like this kind of, that's how we are here, right? Maybe
No,
we could do. I mean, I respect all kinds of decision, but for me, it's this. Let's first
no,
multiply, and then divide.
it's a good answer. It's obviously what came to your mind and how you feel.
Thank you.
So, do you feel you can be open with your friends and families and loved ones and still fit in, with everything going on?
100%.
And one last question. So, if the next couple of years were a chapter, what would that chapter be
Building
in relation to a family?
everything, building my frame. I think that's where I am now. I had a beautiful time in my life to build my personality. I know what I don't like. I don't know everything I want, but I know things I don't want for sure. And I had a chance of traveling intensively the world. And I spent a lot of time by myself, that. And that was a youth of a big change of habits as well over the past decade. And I love it. I love, feeling being and to me, now it's time to build, because it's kind of like I had my time to go abroad to see the world, to get the news, and now I want to tell the stories. But for that, I want to build my place. And then from there, we can. And build means having a frame, right? Having a house, having a family, have a place. Find a place where I can nest, where I feel that I am morally, philosophically aligned, having my intentions aligned as well. And that's it.
Perfect. We'll end on that.
And then
What'd you say?
Next chapter. By the way, one thing on this question. Sorry to go long on this, but not sorry.
No.
I listened to a podcast yesterday, a very interesting one. Was it yesterday or was it 2 days ago? And I'll give you the names because I know you love one of them. Do you mind if I give the name of podcast in your podcast?
Of course. Of course.
So this guy was Chris Williamson, and which is great actually. Sometimes too much. And this other guy is Dr. Turban Orion, right? He's a psychologist for men. And very interesting conversation. But one of the things that really got my attention was when they were talking about chapters. And it just asked me what's going to be my chapter in life. And one of them said, we have so many chapters in our life, but we need to count them wise, because they're going to be over at some point. So which chapter in our lives are we now? I invite everybody to think. And how many more chapters will you have? Because one thing is, I love the idea of failing. I love the idea of failing early. And I love the idea of learning from your mistakes. But we have time as well. And we don't have too many times. So it's very important to do a debrief on things. And that's why therapy is major on this. It's a good place for you to, whenever everything's shattered, instead of building them back, look at the pieces, Let's feel all of them. There's a book from Tara Brach as well called Radical Acceptance. And I love one of the quotes. I don't know if it's from this book, but she has a beautiful quote that says rain, like rain, right? And that means recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. So yeah, every end of the chapters, rain.
I like it. Well, on that, I think we'll kind of end it on that. So I appreciate you joining today. Obviously, you and I had a lot of these conversations. We had these conversations at a pub in London a couple of weeks ago. So I appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure people will listen to this and get a lot of value out of it. So and hopefully you'll buy your ticket to Vietnam soon, so we can have a great trip in New Year's Eve.
Corey, I love you, man. You're a brilliant friend and an awesome kick-ass lad, man. Seriously. We're really blessed to have you around, and I really enjoy what you do. Thank you for having me. It was very fun to talk to you.
Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye.
All right.